Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Love Fruit podcast. And we have another excellent guest once again. Very fortunate to be spending some time today interviewing Paul Nison. And a little bit about Paul. At age 20, Paul was diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease, also known as Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. And on changing to a raw food diet, his health improved quickly, despite the fact that doctors had told him his condition was incurable and a change of diet wouldn't help. Over the years, this experience led Paul to simplify his life, quit his job in the financial industry. He went on to write about 8 books, I believe, about health and raw food diet and healthful living, and he lectured on the raw food lifestyle as well. Ultimately, all of this led him towards the Bible and now living more according to the scriptures. And Paul runs the Raw Life Health Show, over 92,000 subscribers on YouTube. And I believe he's done a lot of other interesting things that I hope to learn more about in detail. Some of his books, The Raw Life, Raw Knowledge, Enhance the Power of Your Mind, Raw Knowledge 2, Healing Inflammatory Bowel Disease, The Daylight Diet, Paul Nison's Raw Food Formula for Health. And you can find out more about Paul at the rawfoodhealthshow.com. So thank you for joining me today, Paul. And is there anything you'd like to add to that introduction?
No, nothing. That's fine. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So one of the first questions I usually ask people is, what was the kind of lifestyle you grew up on? I'm going to assume that from your story, obviously, you weren't born a raw vegan.
No, I was born and eating the standard American diet, French fries and hot dogs and all that stuff. And I was very athletic. I was into sports. So I tried to eat whatever I could that I thought was going to be good to keep me the best at sports. I wasn't doing that. But that's what I grew up on, fast food pretty much.
Yeah. And from obviously that didn't quite work for you. Age 20, you were diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease. So how did you notice that happening?
Well, I was had really bad stomach pains, and then I had some blood in my stool, and I finally led me to get diagnosed with this condition, inflammation of the colon. And at that time, not too many people knew what it was. Today, it's more common. But regardless, the doctors weren't getting me better. They put me on medication, and it wasn't working. So I had to find something else. And I stumbled across a place called the Hippocrates Health Institute here in South Beach, Florida. And when I did that, I learned all about the raw food diet, and I started eating this way, and I got better almost immediately. And so this diet works. So I started teaching other people about eating this way. I was living in New York at the time. I started working as a raw food chef, and just decided to interview people all over the world that have been eating this way. And I put those interviews in my first couple of books. And yeah, so now it's many, many years later, and I'm still thriving eating this diet and still teaching it.
Yeah, and obviously cured your disease, which is amazing. So at that point in your life, you're obviously quite young. Were you already working then? Were you studying? What was happening in your life?
I was working on Wall Street in New York City, and also going to school at nighttime.
Right. So your lifestyle working there was kind of not conducive to health, I suppose.
Well, yes and no. I mean, at the time I was young and I didn't understand things I understand now, but any job, if you like it, you'll be fine. And if you don't like it, you won't be fine. My issue was the diet I was eating and the schedule I was on. But yeah, you can make the best of any situation, but I still was working in a building with closed windows, not particularly doing something I love to do. So the stress from that, I'm sure, contributed to the situation, but it wasn't it was just, I knew there was better. So.
Sure. So you said you came across Hippocrates, but how did you actually stumble upon that living in New York?
Well, the Hippocrates Health Institute is a world-class health spa where they teach people how to get better from all sorts of illnesses that doctors had given up on. And that's located in West Palm Beach, Florida. And when I was 19 or so, I ended up coming down to Florida and moving here. And I ended up moving right next to the Hippocrates Health Institute without even knowing what raw foods was. And so I went there and I, found out about it and I started eating this way.
And were you already had you already started to eat healthier before you bumped into
I switched to a vegetarian diet, but I was doing more of a junk food vegan diet. I didn't know about the raw foods. So I was on a junk food vegan diet. And then I came out here and then I was like, wow. And so I found out about Ann Wigmore and Victoria Skovinskis. So I called my doctor up in New York to see if she thought it was a good idea. And she said no. So I knew I was on the right path because I stopped listening to her a long time ago. And I ate the diet. And then I found some people that were doing a natural hygiene diet. And I looked at all the books. I read Arnold Lehret's books. And I just studied and studied and studied. And then when I wrote my book, I interviewed people who had been doing it for a long time. One of those people was Dr. Fred Bishy, who's been eating a raw vegan diet for many, many years. And me and him became great friends. And I learned a lot from him and other people. And yeah.
Excellent. So what was Hippocrates like at the time? I've been to it a couple of years ago. As you're saying, it's an amazing place, a really beautiful place, and wonderful grounds, and everything. What was it like back then?
Well, it was smaller then, and it was really nice. I mean, I wanted to get better, and it was nice. It was really nice. Now it's a little bit more fancy. But I remember meeting Brian Clement at a health food store giving a lecture, and years later, I ended up working for them or volunteering there and giving a lecture at the health food store for the new people. So it was like full circle. And I also was teaching the health educators there. I still live with less than 10 minutes from there. And, and before COVID, I was going there for dinner a couple of times a week. But yeah, and Brian lives right near me, Brian Clement. So it's a nice community out here. But the average person that goes there is sick, left to die by their doctor. And it's a big thing for someone to go there. And for me to be right here, right next to there, I don't take it for granted, but it's definitely a big blessing. And I realize that.
Yeah. And your transition to a raw diet, was it over time? Was it quite instant? Was it something you picked up on straight away?
No, it was over time. When I first did it, if I can remember back that far, I started eliminating things from my diet. And then the last thing I eliminated from my diet, I believe, was grains.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing millet and quinoa and so on. And that was the last thing I eliminated. And I made 2 attempts at going 100% raw. The first time I failed because I had went like 10 days and then I had something cooked. And the second time I tried, I was able to do it with no problem. And that was only a day later after I ate that cooked meal. So the transition wasn't too hard for me. And the fact that I was feeling better helped make it easy.
Yeah, I think I remember your book, The Raw Life, where you talked about all these different cravings as almost like opponents that you had to defeat on the journey to raw food diet. Is kind of the way you put it in that book, I think.
Yeah, you got to eliminate the things that you're struggling with. And it comes down to discipline. And anyone can do this. Our voice is powerful. So when people say, I can't do it, well, if you say you can't do it, you're already predicting your result. So we can do this. It's not difficult. Now, most people don't need to go 100% raw, and that's fine. From one hand, less than 100% is easier because you have some room to eat some things that are cooked. But from the other hand, it's harder because you never get rid of those cooked food cravings. So each person is going to figure out what works best for them.
Yeah, and the disease you had, inflammatory bowel disease, it's a really serious one and very difficult for a lot of people. And there's a lot of people that get these issues, Crohn's, colitis, these things, and they struggle with it for a long time. Even people that change to a healthier diet struggle with it. For you, did it take a while for that to heal, or was it quick?
No, I was better immediately, and I had some There were some times where I wasn't 100% feeling great, but for the most part, I was better immediately. And for about, I don't know, 12 to 15 years, somewhere in that range. I don't know for sure, I don't remember, but I was 100% raw vegan with no problem. But then I added some, I decided to experiment with some raw dairy or raw and a little bit of cooked food. And almost immediately, not immediately, I got sick. I got sick again. I wasn't feeling good. I wasn't feeling as good. So I stopped after the raw dairy, and then I was better again. And then I did a little cooked food. I did cook food a little, very little. I was doing 90% raw. And then I finally went back to 100% raw vegan.
Sure. So you've kind of done these experiments over the years,
Mm-hmm.
prove to yourself what works best for you. Yeah. So once again, just kind of going back to the story of you uh, starting off with the raw diet and everything. How did you actually learn how to do it? Did you work it out yourself? You talked about Fred Beachy, people like that. Was anyone particularly a mentor, or did you kind of work it out on your own?
Well, no, there was Hippocrates Health Institute and Wigmore and Victoria Skovinskis and Brian Clement had a bunch of books. Then I met a fellow named David Klein, who actually cured himself of ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. So I met him, and so he had good information, and there was just a lot of books out there that I read. And then I interviewed people that have been doing this for a long time, and those interviews helped me as well. So, there's a lot of people out there that have already been doing it a long time at that point. So, I did it and I still do it. And that's how I did it back then.
Did you have a typical way of eating back then?
Yeah, I've changed the way I eat quite often over the years in terms of how much, how often, and when, and just trying to find out what's best for me and most people, experimenting. I don't recall back then. I know when I first started, I was eating a lot more recipes when I first started. I got into eating very simple, almost mono meals for a very long time. And I do believe food combining is important and so on. But then I wrote a book about the daylight diet, about not eating very late at night. And then, you know, sometimes I did more fat, sometimes I did more sugar. It's just all experimenting.
Did you have other friends that were doing this alongside you? Was there a community?
Yeah. So I taught a local group in New York City when I moved back there. I taught a local raw food support group. I also had a restaurant, a raw food restaurant. I also wrote these books, and I was traveling around the country doing lectures. So it got to a point where I knew many, many people, and just about everyone in my life I knew was eating some sort of a vegan or raw food diet. And it's still that way today. A lot of people I know are eating this way.
So you actually, obviously you had the passion to kind of share this with other people. Where do you think that came from?
When you have a disease that can kill you and you find out what can heal you, you're going to tell people about what healed you and what could heal them. So my passion to this day is to still let people know they have choices, and this diet works.
Awesome. I'd love to hear about I was going to ask you about the raw food restaurant. I think I think you say something about it in a video a while back. What happened there? How did that start?
Well, I was working at a vegetarian restaurant called Caravan of Dreams in New York City. It's still there. It's a great vegetarian restaurant. I helped put raw food on the menu there. And I was there for a while, but then there was the mayor at the time was Giuliani, and he was trying to cut down on a lot of places, and he closed the local dancing strip club that was next to the restaurant, and a lot of the dancers used to come into the restaurant, but the owner used to come in as well. So when the mayor had closed down that big place, and they were already eating raw food, and they loved my food, so we did a deal together where I opened up a raw food restaurant out of that club.
Oh, wow.
It was really nice. It was called The Fourth Dimension.
And was that a success?
I mean, from what level, it depends. I mean, while it only lasted 6 months. There was a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I didn't know about that led to the end of that. But while it was open, it did well. It was nice.
Yeah. And And were there many other raw food restaurants in New York at the time?
No, at the time there was Caravan of Dreams. Yeah, there was some. They became more and more. So I would say when I first started, no, but they started popping up, and Quintessence and Pure Food and Wine. So they were opening. But at that point, I was just making my own recipes at home and eating durian and other exotic fruits. I just would travel everywhere and just try to eat as many exotic fruits as possible. And I learned all about the different fruits. And I went to go to there's a Chinatown in New York City. I would go there often and just try new things. And I developed a passion for eating exotic fruits, especially durian. I loved it so much. I went all the way to Southeast Asia just to eat it fresh. And it was an amazing experience.
Yeah. So where else have you traveled? Southeast Asia. I think I remember seeing a video of you in Jamaica. I think have you?
Yeah, I was in Jamaica. I was all pretty much everywhere in terms of the United States. I've been in every state except Alaska, and I went to Jamaica. I've been to South Africa. I've been to Europe a good amount of times, and Australia. So
excellent, and a lot of that was searching for raw foods as well, or just a variety of things.
Either searching for raw foods or going out there to speak and do lectures, because that's what I was doing for a long time in food demos.
How did that come about? That becoming a speaker? Were you invited to speak? Did you decide to become?
Well, it first started when I was in New York City doing a local, I was part of a local support group, a raw food support group. And then they asked me if I wanted to run the support group. So I did with some other people. And then I wrote some books about my experience where I interviewed people that had been eating this way for a long time. At that same time, I got a job at Caravan of Dreams making raw food. I put some recipes in the book. So at that time, there weren't as many raw food books out at all at that time. So, I just decided to go around to health food stores and tell my story. So I did that for a while.
Yeah, and did that? I guess that became the start of a new career, basically, where you were an author and creating books and I imagine maybe some videos and other things at the time.
Yeah, the videos started later because YouTube, and when I started this, I didn't even know about the internet too much. But then I learned about it very quickly. My first book came out in 2000, and and the videos were far and few between. But then I forgot it. I don't know if 2005 or 6 when I joined YouTube and stuff. I can't remember exactly.
That book, was that your first book? Was that The Raw Life?
The Raw Life was my first book. Yeah.
And that book, I believe, was that published?
That was self-published.
Self-published. Because I know that I've heard of people picking up that book all over the place. So it must have got out there quite good.
Yeah, it did. Especially with it being one of the few raw food books at the time. At the time, it did.
And I believe around about that time, there became, there was a point where there was quite a popularity for the raw food diet for a while. People like David Wolfe were popular, ideas like superfoods and all that. Did you experience that at the time? Did you see a bit of a resurgence in the idea for a while?
Well, I was a purist, and I tried to do things as natural as possible. I believe in taking supplements when needed. And the whole superfood thing was a very good marketing plan. But my reason for doing raw foods was because I was sick and I wanted to get better, and I wanted other people to get better and make the best choices for them. So the whole idea of the superfoods really was a marketing plan, but it wasn't the ideal plan for our health. And because there are some foods that were called superfoods for marketing reasons, but they weren't even healthy, let alone not doing what they're supposed to do. So I wasn't a big fan of the whole people promoting those things. Not everyone knew they weren't healthy, but I did the research and I knew, and I tried to let people know. that certain things aren't healthy that are called superfoods, and we could just keep it simple. So, that might have hurt my popularity at the time, but like to this day, my goal is not to be the most popular or most liked person. It is to help people with the choices they need to make when it comes to their health.
Whether I believe there were a number of festivals around the US at that point, and potentially there was a bit of a circuit of places that you would go and speak. I imagine is that what it was like?
Yeah, there was a bunch of festivals. We had a great time at the festivals, and we also I went to the UK. We had the UK festival. Karen Nola ran that out there,
Sure.
and so I was there several times as well. And a lot of people were, they were having festivals and events, and people to this day are still very interested in doing what works. And because of how long I've been doing it and my health, people are starting to ask questions or continue to ask questions. But it's another one of the many different types of ways of eating out there. So people have a lot of choices.
Yeah. And how has your approach to it changed over the years?
Well, like I said, when I first started, I was eating late. I was eating a lot of raw food recipes. I was overeating. I became much more simple in what I eat. I do a lot more greens now. I do more juicing now than I did when I first started. And I definitely try to follow food combining better and not eat as late. And, so it's changed in that sense. But on a bigger level, it's changed on the sense of the spirituality aspect of things that I didn't really have before. And it really changed my outlook on everything in life. So it was a really powerful thing because I found they talk about the raw food diet in the Bible, and the people that were eating that way are the longest living people ever recorded in the history of man. And it definitely is an eye opener.
So you weren't, or were you brought up in a spiritually or in a religion or not, or?
I wasn't brought up in any religion at all. I made my own choices of what I decided when I was young when it came to spiritual aspects. And when I found about the raw foods and I got better from my condition, I started to have a more open mind about belief systems out there. But it was only really until I read the Bible that I really understand things more clearly. And and the funny thing is, I denied it for such a long time because I heard so much things, people talk and say stuff, and it's not that important. It's just written by man. I heard all this stuff. So I didn't read it for a long time. But as soon as I picked it up and started reading it for myself, I was amazed at what was in there. And raw foods was part of it, but it just went on and on and on. And it's been the greatest blessing of my life.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to focus on the Bible being like a religious book, but it's really a book of anyone could really pick it up and get a lot of wisdom from it in terms of a lot of it is knowledge about how people lived, how people learn to live better lives and have better communities, and a lot of it is things like that. Why did you pick it up? What led you to read it?
Well, first of all, you're exactly right. It's a book that's a wisdom filled with how to live a better life. And it's also a history book. It's a historical book. I love history, and it's a history book. For me, I had no intention of reading it, but I did a lecture, and there was a fellow in the audience that said, your lecture was great, talking about raw foods and fasting and healing. But they said, did you know that there's a book out where they talk about those things? It's the greatest health book ever written. And I said, what is it? And they said, the Bible. And I said, the Bible doesn't talk about these things. He said, have you ever read it? I said, no. He said, well, how do you know it doesn't? So I started reading it to prove him wrong. And wow, I was blown away. Not only did he prove me wrong, but he was right. I mean, it talks about this, the greatest health book ever written by far.
So what are the health principles and practices that are directly mentioned in the Bible you can tell us about?
Well, from a physical standpoint, not overeating is very important. It's showing temperance. And that goes right along with one of the things I've learned a long time ago, that overeating is one of the biggest causes of diseases. And now they have the whole idea with COVID and people trying to be extra clean and so on and avoid germs and stuff. Way back in the scriptures, they had systems in place where sick people were not allowed to be around the healthy people. It's been there a long time, and again, these are the longest living people ever in the history of man that were in the Bible. And so there's a lot of, and they weren't eating at nighttime because there weren't any lights. So there's a lot of great information from a physical standpoint. From a spiritual standpoint, trying to do everything by yourself is really difficult. But when you have Yeshua, the one they call Jesus, it just makes life a lot easier. And it's just you're not going at life alone anymore. You have a helper, and it's really a beautiful thing. And to know what he's accomplished and know what we have the capability of accomplishing is definitely a motivating thing. And really what drives me is to know that, and I discover that everyone's going to die, but we're only here for a short amount of time when we look at the time essence in general. And there's a lot more, than just a short time we're here on earth, but then there's a whole nother kingdom that we'll be going to. And, a lot of people have a tough time believing that, but you got nothing to lose but to try to believe it, because so what else you got?
Yeah. So did you have kind of what you call like a conversion experience, transformation kind of through reading the Bible, through practicing these things?
Absolutely. I mean, it's my whole life changed, completely different. Everything that was important to me completely changed. And I mean, death is a very amazing thing, whether it's a death or near death experience that we have ourselves, or seeing somebody die. I don't know if you've ever seen somebody die personally or not. I mean, I see people see animals die and they get emotional, but when you see a human die, that's an emotional thing. And to know that a human died, not only did a human die, but he died instead of me dying. It's like standing on a corner and somebody's about to kill you and somebody jumps in the way of and saves your life. So it's just an amazement. So it's one thing when I got into raw foods, I started looking at things just different in life that I never noticed before. And I used to be amazed by fruits and flowers. I'm like, look how beautiful the flowers are and how great the fruits taste. It's amazing. And then when I became spiritual and I got into scriptures, I realized there's a creator that made those fruits and made those flowers so amazing. And he made me. And it just, every day I'm thankful for that. And it says in the Bible that, he formed us in the womb and he knew every hair on our head before we were even born. And it's the truth. And the thing is, it's history. It's his story. It's not. See, before I read the Bible, I used to think it was made up. I used to think, oh, that's not true. It's a good story, but it's not true. But then I realized that it's recorded in history and it's very true. And they're finding the ancient artifacts that are mentioned in the Bible all over. And so the more I get into it, the more I study it, research it, just like the food. The more I research it, the more I got into it, the more passionate I become about it. But, it's real. It's real. And I can prove it to people that it's real.
To me, there seems to be a theme in the Bible about warnings against behaviors that lead to societies collapsing, essentially. And I think human history has been full of people attempting to create societies and countries that stuck together, but they often fell apart, fell into war. And that's kind of a message that comes up and again, I think. And I'm thinking about, you were mentioning not overeating, and obviously one of the sins is gluttony, essentially. And something I feel, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I feel like in the last century, at least, there's been a move towards there's kind of no shame to eat as much as you like anymore. There's no limitation on that. The advertising and marketing from the junk food industry is encouraging people more and more eat as much as you like, essentially, and that goes against, I suppose, some of the information that you're talking about from the Bible, and it is directly leading to unbelievable disease and which exacerbates the situation, with COVID and everything else. What's your thoughts on that?
100%, you're right. And like I said, people are ignoring the warnings. It's with the food we're eating, how much we're eating, and the different types. In the Bible, it says there are clean foods and unclean foods, but people ignore that. In the Bible, it says, do not dine with drunkards or feast with gluttons. Not only do people dine with drunkards and feast with gluttons, they become drunkards and gluttons. So, you have to, if you follow the simple guidelines that are found in the scriptures, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. But when you look at, there's over 600 commandments in the scriptures about what we should do and not do. And they're not difficult to follow. But if you just even bring it down to the 10 commandments, and you look at the average person, how many of those 10 commandments they're following, and maybe one or two, it's very sad. And then they wonder why they're getting sick. And the Bible's filled with warnings and plagues as a result of people's ignorance and not listening. And our Creator promised over and over again, if you repent, which means to change your mind and start getting right with my word, I will heal you. You'll be healthy. You'll live a long life. But it says clearly, if you do not follow this, you're going to be in trouble. And there's one verse that says in Ezekiel 33:11, it says, God says, I take no pleasure in the death of wicked people. I only want them to change from their wicked ways so they will live. And it's amazing. It's his desire for us to live. He created us and he loves us. And the thing is, I see people in a raw food movement or just in a vegetarian movement and so on. They have no shame in living, against the words of our Creator. And they just take it for granted. They don't really take it seriously. And food's not going to save us, but there's a creator of the food, and that's what's going to save us. Much more powerful than the food. I'm all into healing from green foods and enzymes and things like that. But the creator created that food and with love and in mind. So and fruit trees are the most amazing things in the world. So instead of worshiping the food, I worship the creator of the food. And it's a beautiful life.
Yeah, I was once on an airplane sitting next to a Hasidic Jew. He might have been a rabbi, I'm not sure. I had a conversation with him. I was talking to him about the raw food diet and so on. And he told me he said, there's a rule in the Torah about not cutting down fruit trees. It's one of the rules.
Yeah, there's several rules when it comes to that. Not eating the fruit for several years at the beginning of when you plant a tree. Our Creator wants us to honor our body like a temple, a clean temple, and to keep it clean. And it talks about all these amazing things. And there are people that lived so long. And then Moses was climbing mountains at 120 years old. If somebody's that age today, they're in an old age home. They're not climbing mountains. How much more proof does somebody need?
And I've got a few questions here I'm thinking of. There's obviously the first page of the Bible, Genesis. It mentions Adam and Eve, and it seems to suggest that God was saying, fruit, and I'm not sure if it's fruit and herbs or seed-bearing plants are used for meat, essentially, is what it says, something like that. There's also a passage in the Bible about the Daniel diet, where Daniel's men go back to a more simple diet, I believe, and they able to heal. And I guess there's fasting as well. mentioned.
Well, I wrote a whole book called Health According to the Scriptures, because there are so many people that don't realize what an amazing health book it is. So what you're recommending here, or a suggestion, Genesis 1:29, it says the fruits and herbs are the food for man. And then with Daniel, it's really a marketing plan. It wasn't a Daniel diet. Daniel wasn't a vegetarian, but he was very wise. And when he ate the vegetarian foods, he was stronger and wiser than all the other prisoners. And he didn't worship or bow down to other gods. So that's where the real healing was. It wasn't necessarily in the food, but there's so much information all over the scriptures. So I have this book called Health According to the Scriptures that I wrote, that really pulls out all those scriptures out of the Bible and lets people see from a health standpoint that he wants you to be healthy. He doesn't want you to die. And at any point, you know, he can and he has healed people, and he can heal us too. He healed blind men, he healed crippled people, and he could heal us.
And fasting's mentioned. A lot of people talk about fasting in general in the raw food movement. I'm going to assume that when you started off as well, there was probably a lot of information about fasting and so on. Did you do any fasting for helping with ulcerative colitis at the time?
Well, yeah, I love
fasting. What's your thoughts on it?
I think fasting is wonderful. I think it's great physically and spiritually, and I definitely recommend it. I have a good amount of videos on my website about fasting, and I think there's different types of fast. There's short fast, long fast, water fast, juice fast. So there's different types and different lengths. But overall, the principles and concept of fasting are excellent, because people are eating too much, and to give the body a rest is very recommended.
Did you use it yourself? Did that?
Yes, absolutely. And to this day, I still use it. It's a wonderful blessing. And at Hippocrates Health Institute, they teach people to fast 1 day a week. But it's the more a person fasts, for the most part, I mean, it's only going to benefit their health.
Yeah. Despite, you know, a lot of the information in the Bible, as you're talking about, it doesn't seem like a lot of churches and so on take that seriously, or take the teaching of health principles all that seriously as part of their principles that they teach. There are a few places, and I'm thinking that, I don't know if were you at all influenced or interested in the book, the Essene Gospel of Peace? Did you come across that? Was that something that influenced you?
So you said two things there. The first thing is the church doesn't follow the Bible. They don't. It's a very deceptive thing to think they do. The majority of churches out there are not following the Bible, and you know, and that's just the fact. I mean, they're not. And it says the judgment that will come on them for not doing that. But you know, they might have the book, but they don't open it. And worse for them, because they say they believe, but they don't follow it. So it's not a good thing. So, but they don't follow it for the most part. The Essene, and it's not just the health things they don't follow. They don't follow the other things as well. For the most part, there are some people that do, but for the most part, they don't. The Essene Gospel of Peace is very interesting. I did a lot of research onto it, and it's a great, wonderful health book. I spent many years learning about health, and there's a lot of great health tips in the Essene Gospel of Peace. However, the Essene Gospel of Peace is supposedly a part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's about the Essenes, the community that lived in Qumran in Israel that were vegetarians. However, the reality and the fact is the Essene Gospel of Peace is not from the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's a fiction book. It has nothing to do with the Bible at all. It actually goes against in some areas of what the scriptures actually say. And I don't tell people not to read it because it has great health principles. But when people say it's part of the Bible or from the Bible, not at all. If you read the Bible and you read that, two completely opposite books. And it's a fiction book. It's not, there's nothing, it's completely, it's like somebody writing a health book. You know, and if you want to put a story behind it, go right ahead. But there's true stories and there's makeup stories, and it's not a real story. And the Essene Gospel of Peace, the Dead Sea Scrolls are great to read. Let me put it this way: the Dead Sea Scrolls are close to the Bible. The Bible and the Dead Sea Scrolls are so far from the Essene Gospel of Peace.
Right. Okay. I heard a thing that a number of raw food teachers have actually been indoctrinated or ordained as ministers in the Essene church. And I was wondering if you're aware of that, or why that happened. Is there any particular reason for that?
Yeah, there was a movement or a group called the Essene, which weren't the Essenes from the Bible. There wasn't that community. It's more of, I don't want to say a marketing thing, but it was just like a group that said, "Oh, we're going to be like Essenes." But again, they weren't following what the Essenes followed. And there were some popular raw food authors that were part of that. So they would go around and tell other people, "Okay, you can be part of us as well." But it's a sad thing because it was nothing to do biblically. It was actually against the Bible of the things what the Essenes actually did.
I see. Another group that seemed to promote the raw food diet, also in line with Christianity, was connected with Hallelujah Acres. And I wonder if you had any connection to that, or you're aware of.
Yeah, I'm very aware of them. I'm actually, I work in terms of, I'm a health minister for Hallelujah Acres. I know the founder of it, a great organization. From a diet standpoint, it's an excellent, what they have going on. They're not promoting 100% raw, but it's very practical what they suggest to do. And they're completely vegetarian for the most part. And they're great. They do things from a scriptural standpoint to a degree. And they're good. I give them 2 thumbs up. It's a good program. If anyone is interested in a biblically based program about how to eat, I would recommend them.
So they still operate today?
Yes, they do.
Excellent. I thought they were a raw food organization at one point, or not quite.
They've always been mostly raw, but not 100%.
Sure. There's also the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is more, I suppose, a vegan kind of diet, and
so
the healthiest population in America is the Loma Linda group, I believe.
So Ellen White was the founder of the Seventh-day Adventist, or one of the founders, and she promoted a vegetarian diet. She has wonderful health books, the best I've ever read, and just great books about health and so on. And all the principles I have in my daylight diet are almost identical to her health teachings. However, the church has got away from following them. The church has gotten away from eating healthy. So now they are vegetarians, but they're junk food vegetarians. And by no means are they eating a healthy diet. They eat very little fresh fruits and vegetables. They eat bread and fake meat. That's pretty much their diet for the most part. And it's very sad that they've gotten away from it. It's good that they're vegetarians, in my opinion, but it's not good that they're replacing it of meat and eating junk food pretty much, and so on. So, yeah, but that's not what Ellen White promoted. She promoted eating the foods, raw foods, and some cooked food, but by all means, clean, good, healthy foods. And they're not doing that today.
Sure. And something I also wanted to ask you about, you probably don't fall in line with the kind of Doug Graham style 8-10-10 or the mostly fruit type of diet. Is that right? You don't quite do that kind of thing?
Well, I know Doug Graham very well, and his book very well. I'm very athletic, and his book is great for athletes. I'm a fruit connoisseur. I have a fruit farm. I have over 100 fruit trees that I own. And I just don't think there's one way for everybody in every situation. And so I don't think we can put one particular a set of numbers for every single person that's the ideal way for them in their particular situation. As a person who's athletic, something like that would work well for me. So I balance it out. You know, I do a good amount of greens. They're important to me, but I also I do fruit, and I think it's helpful for me in my situation. So, you know, I'm not for it or against it. I just think it's he's a great example of health, and he's been around a long time, and I know the book's helped a lot of people, and so whatever's working for somebody, it's good for them, and I see a lot of good things coming from it. So I'm not completely against it. But again, I'm against overeating. And I know a lot of people that are into eating fruit tend to overeat. So I don't like that part of it. So yeah.
You mentioned that you grow over 100 fruit trees. Is that different varieties or just 100 different trees?
I have different fruits, different varieties. I live in a tropical location, and I have over 60 different varieties of mangoes. I have bananas, soursops, a whole bunch of tropical fruits. The fruits I travel the world to find, I now grow. But I can't grow durian here, but I grow just about everything else.
Yeah, what are some of your favorites?
Oh, durian, jackfruit, soursop, coconuts, the things that I grow.
Excellent. Soursop's one of my favorites for sure.
Unless you've had these fruits off a tree, though, you don't really know how amazing they are.
Right. Do you ever have the ackee fruit?
Yeah, I have a tree.
You have that as well. 60 different types of mango. Is there any particular variety that's the most special to you?
Yeah, there's one called the lemon meringue, and it tastes like lemon meringue pie. It's pretty amazing. But yeah, I have on YouTube, I have a channel that's all about my fruit trees.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if people want to learn more from you, Paul, and more about what you're doing, where can they go and where should they follow you?
My main website is rawlifehealthshow.com. rawlifehealthshow.com. That's the main place to go. And all my channels are on there. I have several. I have a Bible channel. I have a health channel. I have a fruit channel. So people could check it out there.
Excellent. And what would be your kind of words of advice for a beginner, just to kind of finish us off today?
If you're going to do the raw food diet, do it for yourself, not for anyone else. Don't think you need to impress anyone or do it the way they're doing it. Just get the research and do it for yourself. And learn, and everybody learn to pray and ask God to guide you on your path.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Paul, for giving us your time today. And I encourage everyone to check out the Raw Life Health Show, on YouTube, and lots of videos from Paul there, and his website as well, as he's saying, rawlifehealth.com. He's got a number of books that you can check out as well. So thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you for having me, man.